Okay, all right, well, we're going to continue with the chapter book that we've been reading in Stage 2 that I read with my library, with each of my Stage 2 classes every week in our library lesson. So we're going to continue with that one today. And for those who aren't sure, it is from Andy Griffiths, The Day My Bum Went Psycho. Quality book, remember, based on a true story. So anyway, so where we're up to in the story, guys, remember, I'll just read the last little bit of where we were so you know where we're up to. Come on, she said, as they emerged blinking into the light. My bummobile is hidden in a park not far from here. You've got a bummobile? Said Zach. What sort? A 370 TZ. With retractable wings? He said. Of course, she said. Handles all terrain, even goes underwater. Wow, said Zach. He looked at the girl. She couldn't have been much older than him, and yet she already had her own bummobile. The girl took one of her bum guns from her holster and handed it to him. Here, she said. You'd better take this. Zach looked at the gun and felt his pulse quickening. It was a 4502 double L. The double L stood for laxative launcher. State of the art, it could fire up to 5 capsules of pure laxative per second. Are you sure? He said. Of course I'm sure, she said. What's the matter? Are you scared? No, said Zach quickly. Up until now, he'd only read about guns like this. He'd never dreamed he'd ever actually get to hold one. He held the gun up to his eye, put his finger on the trigger and took aim through the telescopic viewfinder. Suddenly, the gun jolted backwards in his hands and a volley of capsules poured out of its neck. You idiot, said Eleanor. Are you trying to get us killed? I'm sorry, he said. It was an accident. You'll have to be more careful on that if you want to stay alive, she said. Let's go. And keep your head down. I can't see any bums, but that doesn't mean that they're not around. Zach nodded, his face burning with embarrassment. He knew he was no bum fighter, but it was too late to back out now. Crouching low, Zach followed the girl through the long grass by the side of the creek. Soon they reached the edge of a large park. Eleanor pointed to a weeping willow on the other side. Its thick branches drooped all the way to the ground. That's where the bummobile is hidden, she said. Let's go. Zach nodded. They were about halfway across the park when they heard a weird, high-pitched squealing noise that was coming from above them. What's that? Said Zach. Get down, said Eleanor, pushing him roughly to the ground. A bum whizzed over their heads and splattered onto the ground, a few metres in front of them. Kamikaze bums, said Eleanor, pointing to a large dead tree behind them, its branches lined with hundreds of bums, each wearing a red band. We're going to have to make a run for it. She sprinted off across the park towards the bummobile. Zach ran after her. The bums whizzed and whined overhead, exploding all around them. Finally, they made it to the willow tree. Eleanor parted the curtain of branches to reveal the bummobile. Zach's eyes bulged. The 370 TZ was an amazing machine. It resembled an armoured tank, as if the top half had been removed and replaced with 2 large perspex domes. Also, unlike a tank, it had a long yellow nose out the front of it, tapering to a very sharp point. The letters BH007 were written along the side in red, but the thing that really caught Zach's eye were the 3 rocket thrusters mounted at the rear. This would make the bummobile capable of flying at least twice the speed of wind, easily enough to hunt down or, if necessary, escape from the biggest and meanest of bums. Zach was so amazed at the sight of the bummobile that he forgot about the bum gun in his hand. Suddenly, another volley of capsules sprayed out of the neck and into the trunk of the tree. For a moment, nothing happened. And then, Zach saw the most incredible thing he had ever seen. Every single leaf fell off the tree, leaving just a skeleton of branches, and the bummobile completely exposed. Zach blinked and shook his head. They were powerful laxatives, that was for sure. You idiot, yelled Eleanor. Now look what you've done. Oh, it was an accident, said Zach, but he was drowned out by the sound of a bum slamming into the side of the bummobile and exploding. Cover me, said Eleanor, leaping onto the top of the bummobile. She knelt down, grabbed hold of the entry hatch and pulled it open. But a bum was heading straight for her. Zach heard it, spun around, took aim and fired. It was a direct hit. The bum released a volcanic geyser of brown liquid and then blew apart, completely covering both Zach and Eleanor with something very similar in consistency to chocolate mousse, except much, much stinkier. I did it, Zach said to Eleanor, jumping up and down. I did it. That's great, said Eleanor, lowering herself down into the hatch. But what are you going to do about that? She pointed behind Zach and then disappeared into the bummobile. Zach looked around. What he saw made his stomach drop. An enormous boulder was rolling down the hill towards them. Only this was no ordinary boulder. It was a bum boulder. Hundreds of bums clustered together, hurtling across the grass, crushing saplings like matchsticks. Zack stared at it. The bum boulder was less than 50 metres away. "Well, don't just stand there, you idiot," yelled Eleanor, poking her head back up through the hatch. "Jump in." Zack took one last look at the boulder, turned with an almost superhuman effort, jumped straight into the bummobile and pulled the hatch shut behind him. Eleanor was in the front dome of the bummobile, strapping herself into one of the pilot seats. "Hold on," she yelled, firing bum thrusters. But before Zack had a chance to grab hold of anything, the bummobile roared into life. Suddenly he was staggering backwards as they shot up into the sky. Zack hit the back wall of the bummobile and fell sideways. His face pressed against the perspex dome. He saw the bum boulder smash into the willow tree and burst apart, sending the bums flying into the air. They quickly regrouped and began chasing the bummobile. "They're after us!" Zack yelled. The bummobile suddenly dived. This time Zack went flying forwards and fell heavily onto the controls in the front dome, landing with his face pressed hard against the windscreen. "You idiot!" screamed Eleanor. "Why aren't you strapped in?" "I didn't have time," he said. But Eleanor wasn't listening. She was too busy concentrating on the huge mass of bums speeding towards them. There must have been at least 500 of them, a big, angry, wasp-like cloud of bums. "Uh-oh," she said. "Hold on, we're going to have to corkscrew." "What does that mean?" said Zack. Eleanor pulled down hard on her steering wheel. The bummobile started looping in a series of smaller and smaller circles. Zack had already been feeling sick, but this was the last straw. He threw up in a corkscrew pattern, all over the controls, the windscreen and the floor. Eleanor was frantically trying to wipe a clean space on the windscreen to see through when Zack slipped and fell on top of her. Eleanor's head hit the left side of the bummobile with a thump and she slumped in her chair, completely knocked out. With nobody at the controls, the bummobile flipped upside down and Zack fell backwards and landed against the hatch with such force that it sprang open. As Zack fell, he grabbed the edge of the hatch and held on for his life. Zack's heart was pounding as he took stock of his predicament. He was hanging from an upside-down, out-of-control bummobile with a posse of angry bums hot on his tail. Within moments they were at his feet, and at the head of the pack were two bums that he recognised only too well. "Greetings, my dear boy," said the first bum. "What a great pleasure to see you again. Don't you agree, Maurice?" "Oh, yes, your highness," said Maurice, smiling dourly. "It is indeed a great pleasure." And that's the end of the chapter. So stay tuned for the next chapter, next time I read. Thanks for listening.